So when I talk about engaging my customer, what it comes down to is I can talk to them to a certain point, and then at some point I'm going to start turning them off. So the question is in terms of frequency. What's the optimal amount of times I need to talk to them? Uh, what about those passives? How do I re-engage those people? So is it about blogs or email? So I need to identify who they are, uh, what characteristics they have, like are they abandoning carts? On websites, 96% of the people leave without buying. Uh, and there are a lot more people who, though, abandon browsing more than carts, and so that's why they go after you if you abandon your cart. And what they do is they follow up with you using ads or emails or something like that to try to get you to re-engage. Some of the characteristics of re-engagement is don't do it right away because you feel like you're being stalked and it's kind of creepy. And so here are some of the statistics. That abandoned cart email revenue, as you could see, is much, much higher than what you typically get from your blanket spam emails. And so based on feedback, the reason why that's so important to you, even if you're losing customers, is that you can start forming clusters. In terms of re-engaging customers who are just passive, meaning they don't hate you, at least yet, you need to find, what is the frequency that I should be talking about and what type. And so I can use guerrilla or financial tactics, whether it's videos, rebates, discounts. The digital age is about developing customers, and so all the things like shares, likes, and all. The basic idea is that if you can push somebody far enough along who will actually fill something out, those are people who are pretty darn close to getting a sales out of. And so in terms of retaining your customers, so we've talked about re-engagement, but what about retaining them, make sure they don't go away? And so there are four kinds of loyal customers you have. The people who will be with you in the long term, people who spend a lot, the people who buy from different categories from you. And that's it. It's like Apple buyers. They're going to buy the phone, they're going to buy the tablet, they're going to buy the computer and everything else. And then there are customers that you value because non-monetarily they have value to you. And so in terms of retention, these are the kind of things that you look at. Can I create loyalty problems? Can I reward their behavior? And can I give them other things they might value, like shipping or something like that? And so here are the kinds of programs that you can look at in terms of using analytics. And so you develop continuous types of campaigns. And so when we look at corporate growth, their goal is essentially financial. And so what are the approaches that corporations use? And it's based on geography, value chain, distribution, and product development. And so part of the problem with corporations is that when you're making money, you need to focus on making money. But then what happens to innovation? And so what typically happens in a corporation is they go through cycles. They go through cycles where they really need to innovate. So they tend to be looser, more creative, and then they have to buckle down and make money. And so in terms of doing that, how do you set up your organization? It's like, do you do it by different divisions like technology, operations? Do you do it by matrix? The hard thing about matrix is nobody reports to anybody. So how do you have, how do you get people to do things? And R&D and operations, do you overlap them? And the pro is by overlapping them, you're going to be more responsive. The con is that the people in the overlap area, who do they report to? In terms of gross concepts, there's the quantitative aspect and there's the qualitative aspect. And so if you have a good organization, a good app, you see things like low employee absenteeism and those kind of things. And those things are hard to correlate to the bottom line. What do you consider to be good growth? And that depends on who you are. For a young company, 400% growth is almost expected. But for a mature company, if you could do 10 or 20%, you're doing great. And the reason why is because your growth is nonlinear. Eventually, it slows down. And as you can see with Under Armour, it looks like there's almost two slopes in that line around 2010. Now, where they're actually accelerating in terms of growth. In terms of growth objectives, it depends on the department. They have different objectives. Marketing, brand value could be of what? Operation, it could be cost of goods sold, and financial, of course, it's revenue, net income. The key is that all these activities have to coordinate. And so, where are my products moving? What kind of market am I in? And so, am I in a loser market where I'm going to possibly exit is a cash cow, not growing, but I have good margins, keeps the lights on? Potential markets that could be a star, and markets that are a star, that they're growing and you've got significant share. And so that's how corporations classify their markets, and that's actually traditional marketing. In terms of what strategies I use, the strategies I consider is, do I do it myself? Do I acquire the resources? Do I make partnerships? Do I just ride what I have? Or do I do it geographically? And if you recall, this is a lot like assignment 1. So here's some examples of internal, external, cooperative. I'll just let you go ahead and read this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, although I will make a comment about external, and that's it. Why do companies acquire other companies? Well, it might just be that that company has a lot of potential, but if they just tie into something we do, you combine the two, you get something really great. A lot of people said Nestle overpaid for this company, Roundtree Chocolate, that makes Cadbury and stuff like that. The problem with Roundtree Chocolate was they were very, very good at selling in England, but nowhere else. Nestle International brand, international distribution network. And so they thought, if we can get that product in our distribution network, we can make more money than what the company would do in Great Britain, and they actually did quite well with it. You have to look at the nature of your business. For example, in the cloud space, you have no choice. You have to form partnerships. If you're in the medical business, it's an acquisition business. And so you have to look at the nature of what it is that you're doing, because that's going to push you in what way you have to do to grow. In terms of acquiring companies, the things I look for is, can I get growth out of it? Again, will the sum of us create explosive? Can I access those new customers? And can I create new classes of products? And a lot of companies fail at doing these things, and that's why you see them divest companies. In terms of acquisition, the toughest match tends to be operational, and that's that, do you have the same vision and all? There's also limitations to companies that people don't think about. For example, Barnes & Noble and Best Buy, all those properties they have, they lease them. They can't get out of those leases. So if you buy those companies, you're stuck with it. That's why nobody's really stepped in and gone after them. In the 70s and 80s, the big mantra was diversification, diversification. Well, what about Microsoft and Nokia, Google, Motorola? That's not always the answer. My fear is that with all this extra cash floating around, we're going to go back to those ages, and it just doesn't really create value. And so in terms of an enterprise, you're either going to penetrate the market, develop it, expand your distribution or your product development. Those are the tactics that large enterprises use in order to grow and get market share. There's also a geographic strategy, and that pretty much dictates who you are. There's ethnocentric, where you're going after a specific area, polycentric, which means that you spend out into international markets, geocentric, which means that the world is your primary strategy. And Schlumberger, for example, is a company that explores for oil. They'll go anywhere in the world that's oil. And so if you look at like the growth in Apple, China has been their big driver. But the thing is, once the China market starts to dry up, because people basically will determine what phones they like and what don't, where does Apple go? You could look to other sources of revenue expansion. We talked about this, the long tail effect, complementary products, co-promotions, license your technology. For example, Sears, having a cash flow problem, sold off some of its brands, which really hurt. But anyway, so growth takes many forms. You look for things like market share and things like that, or brand share, because that comes important to your long-term strategy. You have to perform on a lot of different levels. And digital growth is about creating an environment for the customer, and that has to do again with branding. And so new product development is an approach where you do acquisition and mergers, geographic strategies, and we basically talked about all that. And so that's a summary of what basically big marketing is about. And it's important to understand that. A lot of this course is focused on grassroots marketing for the simple reason because a lot of you are going to be entrepreneurs, and that's what it is. But there's still a place for big marketing for the simple reason someday you will be a big company, or some of you will go into big companies. And so you need to use your creative marketing and inject it into the standard marketing.